Joe, highly inspected analyst, an American media industry and pop culture, Fox News contributor, columnist, The Hill, and sought-after prominent podcast guest. Joe will share behind-the-scenes accounts reporting on the 2024 campaign election and will dwell mainly on his book, which is called The Greatest Comeback Ever, Inside Trump's Big Beautiful Campaign. And those of you who have a copy of that and you would like him signed, he will be happy to do that at the end of the evening. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, are you all set? Okay. Just a minute here. Hold on. Is there a chiropractor in the audience? Okay. Okay?
All right, we should be good. Yep, be good.
Woo. We are working on tech stuff right to the last minute, through no fault of anybody's, okay? Just to point the logistics here. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please bring to the podium Mr. Joe Concha.
Watch yourself there. Watch yourself. What a great crowd here. I mean, I love this place. I really do. I've never been before. I've never been to Western New York before. And I called my wife earlier, all right? I said, look, we're moving here. That's it. It's like Punxsutawney, you know, Bill Murray goes there in Groundhog Day and he says, let's live here. But I did notice, and I see a business opportunity, so I'll continue to do the Fox stuff. I could move a studio basically to anywhere. But just to open up a business here, because I see a need. I don't see a lot of Mexican food here. Okay? And I was just thinking that I could open up a place, and we call it Chautauqua Bell. That's going to do well now, isn't it? No question. But it's weird. I don't know what to do with myself. Like, you probably saw me. I was just walking around here all day. So I got two kids. One is 9, one is 11, and I'm used to doing a lot of things with them. I coach baseball, I coach football, you know, human Uber, just back and forth to all these practices and everything. And now, like, this is the first time I haven't been with them on a trip since like 2019 or something. So it's weird. And I talked to my son today, and he's like, oh, Daddy, I miss you. You're going to be home for my birthday, right? I'm like, yeah, of course. My son's birthday is on Wednesday. So, and I'm thinking back, like, wow, this kid's 10 already. It goes by so fast. And I remember, like, when we were in the delivery room, and what my wife and I decided to do was, we're not going to name the kid until we look at his face. I don't know if anybody here did that. Most people plan ahead. I'm like, I want to see the face. So sure enough, it's a C-section, unfortunately. Doctor, you know, brings the baby out of the womb and says, congratulations, Dad, it's a boy. And I look down, I go, wow, and what a boy. And he says, no, sir, that's the umbilical cord. You got to cut that. No, I had no idea. All right. Plus, he's half Irish. That couldn't have been accurate. But anyway, so then my wife is, you know, looking at our son, and she goes, wow, you know, that looks like a nice Gaelic boy. You know, my wife's Irish and Spanish. She goes, why don't we go with the name Liam? And I'm like, Liam, that's a good name. I like those Taken movies, Liam Neeson. Okay, I could go with that. And then, hi. Woo! Somebody stepping a duck. What was And we're good. All right, well done, sir. Give him a hand, everybody. Come on. Too tall for a mic. That's the first time that happened. So anyway, my wife says, all right, let's go with the name Liam. I said, I don't know, honey. I'm looking at that face, looking at that jawline, those eyes. I could only come up with one name. Let's go Brandon. Let's go Brandon. And she says, I don't know, I got a funny feeling about this. And then the same thing with my daughter, you know. I mean, my mother's name is Karen. Let me kick that around for about 2 seconds. And again, just weird, you know, hair standing in the back of your neck, like probably not a good idea. This is like 2015, before the Karens came about. Look, I promised during the reception that we had last night, not everybody, of course, that's here today was there, but I spoke to, I know some people in the Trump administration, and I spoke to Pam, spoke to Bondi, and she's like, look, this Epstein, list is a real pain in the ass right now. She goes, Joe, you just handle it, all right? You release it. I'm like, all right, this could be fun. So I have the list here. It's on my phone. All right. So I'm going to go, let's go alphabetically, all right? Let's start with the A's, last name A. Is there a Paul Anthony here? That one just wrote itself. Did it like 5 minutes ago in the waiting room. Oh, man. But thanks to everybody who bought the book. I saw a couple of you in the bookstore today. There were two ladies that were there that said, oh, are you going to the event later? And I'm like, I don't know. Who is this guy? So if you're here and you want to wave, I was that guy in the Oakland A's jersey. All right. So you might not be able to get in. We heard it sold out. I go, well, I know some people. It's all right. So anyway, yeah, the book is The Greatest Comeback Ever Inside Trump's Big Beautiful Campaign, but I wanted a longer title. But they said, well, we're not going to be able to fit it on the whole cover, but I wanted The Greatest Comeback Ever Inside Trump's Big Beautiful Campaign, Unburdened by What Has Been. Again, it writes itself. They're like, Joe, not long enough, no way. And then, obviously, the back of the book is really fun. So this is the part where you usually see people have all these endorsements from other people in the business. They never read the books that they're endorsing. How would they know? You know, before publication, they endorsed it. Come on, give me a break. So those things usually are phony. So I decided to go with, throughout the campaign, I created this email, special email just sent to myself, where every time I saw something, I'm like, good for the book, good for the book. So I had this one Yahoo account that was strictly for the book, right? And these were, in this case, all of the predictions that were off just by a little bit, okay? So let me read them to you. Trump's going to lose. He's going to lose badly. He's going to get wrecked. That was Rick Wilson of the acclaimed Lincoln Project, okay? I also have Republicans in here as well. Donald Trump will not win the general election. There will be a female president of the United States. It will either be me or it will be Kamala Harris. How you doing, Nikki Haley? Didn't quite come about. Let's see. Chris Christie, the governor of my state, former governor. We simply cannot expect that someone like Trump can be a viable fall candidate against Joe Biden. Whoops. All right. Apparently that surgery you get also affects the brain. Let's see. Sorry. This is absolutely my favorite one. Trump can't last as president for 4 years with his brain deteriorating at the rate it is. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Hey, Nance, A, put down the glass. B, you got the wrong guy, all right? Let's see, George Conway. Trump won't succeed. Too many Americans would crawl on broken glass to vote against him. Let's see, Joe Scarborough. You know what? Victory is in sight. The opponent is imploding, and Harris is doing better than ever. Another great prediction by Joe. Let's see. And finally, Bill Kristol. Great conservative. You know who's not going to get the credit they deserve? Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, sit down for this, Liz Cheney, and tens of millions of women who will be responsible for defeating Trump. Then finally, I have one more prediction at the bottom. Trump wins this quite easily. Save the tape. Play it back if I'm wrong. This is how it's going to end. And that's what a guy named Joe Concha said in October 2024 on Hannity. Yeah! Then again, I've picked the Bills every year to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs, and that didn't work out too well. So you never quite know, in these situations. So interestingly enough, and I'll try to get these pictures up if I can. Technically, I am not the sharpest tool in the shed, so the computer always freezes. Let's get that up. Okay. So here, you probably saw this before. When I decided to do the book, I reached out to Trump's people, and I said, hey, I've never been to a Trump rally before because they don't really come to New Jersey, like, ever. So can I cover this, like, behind the scenes, backstage? And they write me back, and they say, sure, Joe. In fact, we'll provide transportation. So I'm thinking I'm getting, like, an Uber X. That's the good one, Uber XL. And then they're like, okay, you're going to meet the Trump plane on the tarmac at LaGuardia Airport, and we're going to fly you down to Atlantic City for the Wildwood rally, which I thought was pretty cool. And then, hopefully this goes forward. Please go forward. Nope, that went zoom. All right, 1 second, guys. Sorry. There we go. All right, so on the plane, all right. Sorry, I just gave away a punchline. So he has golden, seatbelts, which I thought, all right, that's very on brand for Trump. Now, meanwhile, I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and I had breakfast pretty early, 6 a.m. I maybe had some yogurt. At this point, it's around 2:30. I'm like, I wonder what they're going to serve. Trump had those steaks. Remember, he had Trump steaks. Or maybe some lobster tails. It's the Trump plane. It's going to be first class. It's going to be all the way. What could he possibly have on here? Oops. And, of course, this went out again. Sorry about this, guys. And he served Wendy's. That's a cheeseburger, some tater tots, some French fries, and, of course, Coca-Cola. So that was pretty fun to go on the plane and see that. And we flew all the way down to Wildwood, New Jersey. Eventually, we got there anyway. And sorry, guys, just 1 second. This is really clunky. It's not the way I want it to go. All right, let's see. Sent in Susan. This is way too big. Sorry, guys. Give me 1 sec. 200%. Definitely want that. All right, then we go down to there. Okay, sorry. Boy, this is funny on some level, isn't it? Yeah. All right, let's see. All right, there's my email to Susan. Hey, Susan, here we go. All right, nope. Nah, this just isn't going to cooperate now, is it? Oh well. All right, you're gonna have to believe me on this. I'll just keep going. I guess you don't want to read my emails at this point either, do you? All right, yeah. So we're driving down to Wildwood from Atlantic City, and they actually put me in the motorcade, which I thought was very cool also. And what they do is on the Garden State Parkway, they close down, it's the main highway that goes down the shore. There are 2 lanes. And 1 lane they close off completely. And it's flanked by state troopers. So the motorcade doesn't have any cars going next to it. Of course, makes sense. Suddenly, these 2 ladies, probably born before World War II or I, not sure, kind of like over the steering wheel type. I look over and they're looking over at us and I'm looking over at them and they have this look like, where are we? They accidentally wandered into the motorcade. And I said to the guy next to me, I go, how did the Golden Girls penetrate a motorcade? It's incredible. So eventually, they kind of like fall back eventually, and they're able to get off an exit, and a police car follows them, I guess, to question them to see, because he couldn't tell that they were who they were. I'm like, boy, that's kind of lax. That's interesting. And then when we get to the rally, I noticed that Trump's speaking. I don't know how many of you watched this rally. It was in May of 2024. Behind him, there's all these rides, right, for the amusement park, and they're still operating. Like right over the stage, basically. I'm like, they're going to shut those off, right? I mean, is anybody then, in any way vetting the people that are on these rides? It's a perfect shot, like over the stage. Again, there was no assassination attempts against him yet, so you're not really thinking too much in that regard. But I remember just writing notes to myself furiously, like, this does not feel secure. The boardwalk had people streaming back and forth. That was about 150 yards away. They couldn't have vetted the 100,000 people that were there all on the beach. No one went through metal detectors or anything like that. So I'm thinking, this feels not all that secure. And then a plane even flew right over the stage of Trump. It was a small plane, but I'm like, why is that allowed in the airspace? Like crazy stuff. Anyway, we get through that, and Trump's riding high at this point. He's beating Biden in the polls. And then the debate happens a couple weeks later in Atlanta, so I fly down for that. It's at Georgia Tech. And we all saw what happened during that as far as Trump and Biden was concerned. I mean, that was the end of the race, at least for Biden anyway. And we saw the pictures, we saw how that all worked out. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to get that up either. But yeah, the look on Biden's face and Trump's face, it just said it all. And a couple of weeks later, Biden actually has to drop out. And it's amazing when you think about what happened from May 27th, when that debate happened, and June 21st, when Biden dropped out. Because in between there, on July 9th, Joe Biden, when he's trying to save his candidacy, says it's time to put Donald Trump in a bullseye, unquote. That's what the sitting president at the time in the United States said. And then 4 days later, some 20-year-old kid's able to fly a drone over a field where Trump is supposed to speak. A 20-year-old kid is somehow able to hide a high-powered rifle next to a building, the one building that had the line of sight to Trump on that stage, and no one walked around the building to see if there may be a gun there. And then after that, once they realized that there may be a threat, when Trump's about to go on stage, and there's clearly, all right, on the radio, so there's a threat. Somebody decided, you know what, Mr. Trump, go break a leg. It's all right. Let's roll the dice and take our chances. Like, who sent him out there? Like, I'm not a Secret Service agent, but that's 101 kind of stuff. And then the fact that no one decided to check that building where that kid was on top of. And then a police officer, finally they notice that people are yelling, there's somebody on that roof. A police officer climbs up, looks at the kid turns around with the rifle, and he climbs back down. You start firing, dude. So then he was able to turn around, he got off all these shots. Trump looks hard to his right to look at a chart that he's never read before at any rally, and obviously if he doesn't turn, boom, brain, done, national television, turns, ear, survives. Incredible. And the fact that Trump was on the ground, now there's a full minute, and I'm about to go on the air on Fox, I was doing the big weekend show, and he's down there for a minute, you don't know what's going on exactly, like if he was like truly hit, anything, you just don't know. And then for him to get up there and just decide to go fight, fight, fight. That was one of the most badass moments you'll ever see, like ever. Like forget politics, like ever. Like you thought that in the moment. So when I interviewed Trump, I said, what made you want to get up there when there could have been a second shooter? You could have been re-exposing yourself. he said, oh, there was a stretcher on the stage. They wanted me to get on it. He said, I didn't want to show any weakness because I knew my son was watching Barron. I knew my wife and my family was watching. The country was watching. The world was watching. And that would look weak. And I wanted to show everybody that this movement was not going to be stopped no matter what. Fight, fight, fight. I'm like, whoa, that's awesome. You know? Just incredible. So then, again, the news cycle is insane because then just 2 days later, it's the Republican National Convention. And Trump's already out of the hospital. He's got this big bandage on his ear. And all I remember is MSNBC questioning whether he got shot or not. Seriously. They're like, oh, boy, he's wearing that big prop on his ear to gin up sympathy. Dude, he got shot. What would you have him do? Like put on like, a Band-Aid and just be like, all right, we're good. Part of his ear got cut off. So when I heard that, I couldn't believe it. But then we didn't still have a vice presidential pick. And he picks J.D. Vance. And I got to be honest with you. At the time, I didn't think that was the right choice. And the reason why I thought this way was J.D. ran for Senate in Ohio, and he won by 6 points. You say, oh, that's pretty good. Problem is, Mike DeWine ran for governor of Ohio in the same election, and he won by 25. I'm like, where'd that 19 points go? Exactly. Like, what's different about J.D. where he loses 19 points off the Republican ticket? And I honestly, I went on Fox, and I thought that Marco Rubio or Glenn Youngkin were the better choices. And, Youngkin, Virginia, purple state, 60% approval. Okay, that's good. Marco, I think, is a complete rock star and will be president one day. So maybe he will still be on a ticket and probably at the top of it at some point. But J.D. Vance is completely, in terms of every expectation, has exceeded them. And, it's funny because then after Biden dropped out on July 21st, which really pissed me off, by the way, not because I thought he should be president, because all year I had not one vacation. And I'm in Cape May, I'm with the family. I just purposely leave my phone behind so I could go out, my little wagon, my little boogie boards, and my little cooler with my little Bud Lights, or Busch Light, sorry. And I was fine with it. Can't drink Bud Light, what am I saying? Jeez, covered myself on that one. And then sure enough, my wife says, Biden just dropped out. She had her phone with her. I said, I'll be back. I walked to the room and bzz, 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 and Fox is saying, can you join? Can you react to this? Because they think I'm at home and I have my home studio where in 5 seconds I could be dressed like this and I'm on the air and it looks great. I said, sure, not a problem. And after I hung up, I go, oh, crap. A, I don't have a studio. B, I go to the closet. I have like maybe one shirt you could wear on the air from like Banana Republic from 2004. And it's yellow. Ugh. Otherwise, if you've seen me around here, I kind of wear like jerseys a lot. That's basically all I had, a couple of T-shirts, that sort of thing. So what I learned was South Jersey does not have one men's store near the beach areas within 40 miles. Not one. You can't find a shirt, a tie, nothing. I finally found one at Marshall's, or to make it sound good, Marshall's, and we were able to go on, and I joined from there. So that was interesting. But again, in the span of 8 days, we had a presidential candidate shot, a vice presidential candidate chosen, which a lot of people didn't expect, and then a sitting president drop out in the span of 8 days. That is incredible. So then what are the Democrats going to do as far as that was concerned? In other words, they could have had a lightning primary, right, for starters. They could have, sorry about that, could have done a lot of things. But let me first show you Milwaukee, which is very interesting. Met Dennis Quaid. Now, you tell me how that guy is 70. That ain't 70. That's like 47, And then I met his wife, and I realized why he looks the way he does. She's 33. 6 foot, met her in Las Vegas while she was going for her master's degree. I'm like, all right, this guy, that's pretty smart. That's good stuff right there. But anyway, so that was Milwaukee, and I met Hulk Hogan there as well. So then, finally, the Democrats decide on Kamala, not because she was the best candidate, because there was 300 million reasons to do it, which was all the campaign donations were not transferable to another candidate. In other words, Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer, they can't just step in and take that money. It is only with the Biden-Harris camp, and that's why they had to go with her ultimately. So they go with Kamala, and for the first 6 weeks that she's a candidate, she doesn't do one interview. Not one. Not with The View, not with Rachel Maddow, it's just unbelievable. They kept her completely under wraps. So then finally they're like, okay, why don't we go to CNN? This is like around Labor Day, and we'll do her first big interview. And this thing, I don't know if you remember, it was at a cafe in Savannah, okay? I'm sorry, hopefully I can blow that up. A little bigger anyway. Hello, guys. Can you make that bigger? All right, thank you. All right, so what was weird about this was, all right, there's Dana Bash on the left, who is a complete hack. And then, for whatever reason, there's goofy Tim Walz there also. Tim Walz. And it looks like a parent-teacher conference. Right? she's got like the human, like emotion, guy, like right there, like the sponge, and then she's there, and she's like at least like 2 feet below her, and she's slumped over, and it's dark in the back, and it was not a good launch to her campaign at all. And by the way, Kamala had one big decision to make throughout her 100-day campaign. Who are you going to choose for vice president? And she decides on the goofy 80s sitcom dad that is Tim Walz, right? I mean, she had Josh Shapiro, right? Pennsylvania, not too far from here. Shapiro's at like 62% approval in a purple state. And if you don't win Pennsylvania, well, you're probably going to lose the election. And Shapiro's a good public speaker. And, you could go down the line like why he was like a 2-inch putt. And she goes, I'm going to take that guy from Minnesota instead that let Minneapolis burn to the ground. I heard he was a great coach once in football. Well, no, he wasn't a head coach. He was a volunteer coach because he did, in his 30s, mind you, got caught doing 97 miles an hour and got a DUI. So yeah, great record so far. Oh, how about his war record? That's pretty good too, right? No, kind of left his unit when they got deployed to Iraq, so that's not good. So when you go through everything with Tim Walz, including, again, I mentioned my son's in elementary school. Can you imagine him walking into his bathroom and seeing a tampon machine? You know the questions I'm going to get when I get home? Dad, what is that exactly? And I got to explain that one? No, thanks. So she went with Tim Walz, and that was just a whole bowl of wrong. So anyway, and there he is. Now that's the funny thing, right? That's during the vice presidential debate. And vice presidential debates usually don't mean anything. In other words, like you don't remember them at all. Maybe Lloyd Benson, Dan Quayle, I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. You know Jack Kennedy. All right, great line. They still lost the race. So overall, vice presidential debates really don't determine anything. But in this case, you saw that this guy was, deer meet headlights. Like, this is not who you want a heartbeat away from the presidency. Meanwhile, the pitcher of confidence was obviously J.D. Vance, and he did a phenomenal job at that particular moment. And then I looked at the Teamsters as far as, like, that's such a big part of campaigns, especially if it comes down to Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, right, and it usually does, then you need the Teamsters vote. And Democrats could vote on that, count on that every time. So before Biden dropped out, he had about an 8-point lead on Trump. He had exactly an 8-point lead on Trump. And all right, that's pretty good. Okay, that's pretty good support. Pretty good for a Republican also to get that much of the Teamsters. Watch what happens when Kamala entered the race. Same thing, this is the Teamsters internal poll. It goes to, and I'm sorry that's so small again, whoops, and it went away altogether. Sorry about this, guys. Oh, by the way, I missed JD. That's a picture of confidence right there. So there we go. All right. And we got the Teamsters here. All right, there we go. So it went from Biden plus 8 to Trump plus 27. That's a 35-point swing. And again, Kamala's a Democrat. What's the difference? Well, I guess Joe always positioned himself as like a pro-union guy, but in the end, they knew that she was an elitist from San Francisco who obviously would not have their interest at heart in any way, shape, or form. And then, when you think about it, if Trump was getting the Teamsters, and he was probably getting then United Auto Workers. Getting United Auto Workers, he's probably getting farmers in Wisconsin. He's probably getting steel workers in Pennsylvania. He's probably getting people in the service industry in Nevada. And that's where I started doing the math, and that's why I was so confident in my prediction. I said, if he has all of those people, and he's gaining the way he is with blacks and Latinos, what's left to vote for Kamala Harris? What block? Childless cat ladies, yeah, but that's not going to get you an election. So that was huge. That poll, that was the moment where I'm like, okay, that's going to be the end of it. And then there was the Al Smith dinner. And whoever was running Kamala's campaign decided it was a really good idea not to go. Now, if you want to win an election, you absolutely need the Catholic vote. It is the biggest voting bloc in the country. And they decided that they were going to keep her somewhere else and then send a video with an actress who was relevant on Saturday Night Live when Bill Clinton was president. Seriously, like the 90s. That's Molly Shannon, and she played this character named Mary Catherine who rubs her armpits a lot when she actually is nervous. And this thing, and I was there, got booed because, again, why would you blow off Catholics like that? What are you thinking, And meanwhile, Trump had, like, great lines. I mean, he's, like, basically like the Dean Martin of, like, roasters when it comes to these things. And he had one great line I remember. He said, Democrats keep telling me that there's more than 2 genders. And I didn't believe him. Until I met Tim Walz. So yeah, Trump crushed it that night. He won the news cycle once again, and that was just incredible. So now we're in October, and things seem to be going his way. And then obviously that's what I used for the book as far as Trump and the McDonald's picture. And the media just went off on Trump when it came to this because it's a stunt. you know, he really didn't work there. It was just like a display. Of course he didn't work there, but the point was that he was the guy you could relate to. And what this does is it diffuses the narrative that Trump is a fascist and that he's Hitler. Because at last check, Hitler didn't work the fries in the drive-thru. All right? He's a happy warrior. In the 2020 election, Trump was not happy on the stump because it wasn't much of a stump, right? COVID basically rendered his rallies useless. All he had to do was defend himself on a virus that came here from another country. The country was miserable. We all remember what that was like. The no sports thing that did not fly with me, and then no one in the stands. That was really weird. But the point is that this election, you could tell who was winning by who was having fun. And Trump absolutely was having fun, while Kamala seemed to be flailing at that point. And then we got to, obviously, another event that I went to, which was at Madison Square Garden, which I will find for you in a moment, if I can, hopefully. Let's see. All right. Sorry about this, guys, once again. There we go. All right. Coming. There we go. Okay. Oh, yeah, there was the garbage truck, too. I forgot about that one. Now, remember, that's when Biden called all Trump supporters garbage, and obviously Trump not missing an opportunity in any way, shape, or form. They were able to get a garbage truck in Madison, Wisconsin, and then dress it up with Trump stickers, and then Trump obviously wore this. And again, the guy having fun is the guy who's going to win, and that was another example of that. Now, you may be wondering who this guy is. That's Tony Hinchcliffe, okay? So I went to the Madison Square Garden rally, and this was October 27th, 2024, and this guy Hinchcliffe came up about 5 hours before Trump spoke. And he made a joke about how Puerto Rico has this big garbage problem, right? It's an island of garbage. And if you look up, news accounts out of Puerto Rico, it is true. More than half the refills, garbage is overflowing. They don't know what to do with it or where to put it. Nevertheless, not the best joke to tell at that point. You don't want to offend anybody or anything like that. But then again, it's a joke. So what happens instead, we see headlines after this basically saying that the race is now over because a guy who spoke at a Trump rally, who Trump's never met before, told a joke about Puerto Rico, and that's what's going to spread like wildfire in Pennsylvania and flip that swing state. In other words, the argument was being made that forget about inflation being above 9%, and forget about the fact that the border's allowed anywhere from 12 to 15 million people in the country, and forget about the fact that a lot of people are leaving major American cities like San Francisco, Minneapolis, Atlanta, New York, Chicago because of crime, and forget about all these other things like men playing against women in sports because a guy you've never heard of before told a joke about Puerto Rico. So if you were going to vote for Trump, you're now going to switch to Kamala because of a joke from a guy that you never heard of before. That's what our media actually tried to push. And obviously, that didn't happen. Trump ended up winning Pennsylvania and every swing state for that matter. But before the election, 2 days beforehand, there was a poll showing that Kamala Harris was up 3 in Iowa. Okay? Iowa hasn't gone to a Democrat, I think, since The Wizard of Oz, like right around that time. Because if you look at the voting, there's a lot more Republicans than Democrats in a place like Iowa. And there's a woman named Ann Selzer who it was called the gold standard. Remember, she's the gold standard. Her polls are the most accurate. You got to believe this stuff. So she actually had Kamala not only winning, but winning in a place like Iowa. And I remember going on Fox and saying when I had to react to this, I go, please, I will give up my salary. Allow me to be on the morning after the election so I could dunk specifically on this poll because he's going to win by 12 to 14 points. Trump won by 13, okay, right in the middle, yay. Not a hard prediction to make at that point. But so these are all the things that were going against Trump going into the election, and that was the result. That's what the country looks like as far as voting between red and blue. You see blue concentrated up mainly in New England, along the coast of California, some smidgets obviously are in New York and New Jersey, but that's about it. So that's where the country is going. Overall, 89% of counties in the United States voted more red than blue in this election. That is an incredible stat. Incredible. And then afterwards, we learned that actually Kamala Harris raised $1.5 billion with a B, and not only went through that $1.5 billion by paying people like Beyonce, Bruce Springsteen, Eminem to perform at her rallies so the crowds looked bigger, right? But they went through that money and even had a deficit. So that makes you wonder, like, what if she was elected president and her team that was in charge of the campaign would be the same type of team she'd have around her stewarding the economy? It's hard to spend $1.5 billion in 100 days, and they did it, and again, 89% of counties went more red than blue, so not exactly a good return on investment at that point. So yeah, overall, we all know what happened from there as far as Trump and his cabinet. What's different this time around than 2017, In 2017, he had people around him who he really kind of didn't know, right? Like Jeff Sessions, okay, you were nice enough to endorse me early, so I'll make you Attorney General. And then he recuses himself from the Russia investigation. Reince Priebus was his chief of staff. That lasted about 4 months. Anthony Scaramucci was once director of communications for the Trump White House in 2017. I mean, you could just go through on and on. And obviously, the head of the Senate and the head of the House, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, weren't exactly on the same page as Trump. And you remember when he tried to appeal Obamacare and John McCain, the famous downvote. 2017 was not a good year for Trump because he just felt like, the knives were out all around him, like who can I trust? Now he has a cabinet that he could absolutely trust. When you talk about Pete Hegseth, when you talk about, obviously, Scott Bessent, who I think is the MVP right now, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., isn't that amazing? HHS. He's got Tulsi Gabbard, DNI. These are Democrats that are, two that ran for president as Democrats, not like lower level people that, hey, I'll throw in a token Democrat. So that's the coalition that Trump has built at this point. As we're now 6 months into his presidency, we have inflation that was above 9%. Under Joe Biden to just over 2%. We now have more job openings than people applying for jobs, so unemployment going in the right direction. We have growth now at this point, consumer confidence all-time high. S&P just had its best month. Iran no longer has nuclear capabilities. We have a ceasefire in Gaza. Men, at least Trump tried, Democrats voted down as far as men playing against women in sports. That's been a culture shift now where people now are against that to the point where the University of Pennsylvania had Leah Thomas, they asked her to apologize and a stripper of all of her championships, which I mentioned to some folks before over lunch, but bears repeating. My wife grew up, I'm not gonna say poor, but let's put it this way. My father-in-law had triple bypass at age 37. And he did like heavy manual labor, so he couldn't go back to work, obviously, for that reason. So then he had to basically do things like caddying, while my mother-in-law was like an administrative assistant for like a small company. So they didn't have a lot of money at all. So it's my wife, her two sisters, mom and dad, one bathroom. Imagine being my father-in-law and sharing a bathroom with 4 women, just for a moment. I can't share one with one, my own wife. Imagine 4. That would be interesting. But my wife was, top of her class, but she was this exceptional runner, like a Giselle, and she was number 3 in the country at one point. So then she has all these schools, like, trying to get her to come there, whether it be Princeton, whether it be Penn, whether it be Vanderbilt, Georgetown. She decides on Georgetown, but obviously they can't afford Georgetown, but she gets a full scholarship. She's also pre-med at Georgetown, so you're pre-med and you're running track. So not much of a social life as far as, that was concerned. But when she got out and, we get married and we have our 2 kids and she's an ER doctor now, so hopefully none of you ever meet her because it's probably, hey, how you doing? I'm Joe's wife. That'd be bad. No, overall, the amazing thing is that she wasn't involved politically too much, but then once she saw Leah Thomas at the University of Pennsylvania, and she's winning all these races, and she sees the photos afterwards, and Leah's up here at 6 foot, and then like Riley Gaines is like 5'3", it's like, whoa, obviously that's unfair. And she's like, do you imagine? You do all this training, you put your blood and guts into this, and you're on the blocks, and you're about to race, and you look down, and there's Saquon Barkley. Legs anyway, and you're like, I know I can't win. I could train as much as I want, I know I can't win. And that was such a big part of this election, as far as suburban women who may not be politically involved, not watching Fox 24/7, but said, I don't want my daughters being exposed to men in locker rooms. And that's a cultural shift that we're now seeing under Trump in terms of it going the other way. So overall, I really want to thank all you guys for coming here. I think it's been, and staying cool, I can only imagine what that's like. They gave me a fan. I mean, I'm a diva, what can I say? But I really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks so much. Hey, it's that Epstein guy. You got it.
Okay. Fresh off the Epstein plane, they served Burger King on that one, no Wendy's, okay, just for the information. Okay, I just want to say that, as you heard Joe say, he is dying to come back here. So somebody approached me and said, I will donate right now $5,000 to his returning. When I went to Georgetown, we learned the Latin quid pro quo.
Oh no.
Okay? And by the way, 5,000 was 2,500 more than he's getting right now. So you should be happy with that, okay? Anyway, we would love to have you back next year, and we'll stay in touch with that. First question.
Chautauqua Bell.
I would like to second that sentiment, but we'd like you to buy a home here. And I can promise you that your family will be very busy when you're away, as it sounds like you are a great deal. So I'd like to ask for some insight. And many of us want to understand what went wrong on the Democratic Biden side of things. It's very easy to just focus on politics, but so much was missed. There was an impaired leader. There were terrible mistakes made. Is this groupthink? Is this a Machiavellian power grab? Is it some combination? And because of your insight from within the Trump campaign, I suspect there were a lot of analytic, somewhat cold discussions about what exactly was happening so that you could deal with it. So that's my question.
Yeah, that's a great question, by the way. Inside the Trump campaign and talking to Chris Lasavita and Susie Wiles and the people I had exposure to, I had written a book back in 2022 called, what was it called again? Oh boy, Come On Man, the truth about Joe Biden's no good, terrible, horrible, very bad presidency, right? And in it, I went through all the examples of why it was clear that Joe Biden's brain had turned to applesauce, like during the 2020 campaign. Forget 2024 in that debate. He had been talking for some time and shaking hands with the heir or talking to world leaders that hadn't been with us for many years or couldn't remember the names of his cabinet members. That was apparent in 2021. So the Trump people knew that they had a distinct advantage if they were going against Biden for those reasons, because clearly on top of all the inflation and the border and all the things that were going wrong, there was a president that in the eyes of many Americans, when you look at poll after poll, thought was impaired and probably shouldn't run for a second term. I think that in the end, it was power, but not because Biden thirsted the power so much. I think he's stubborn. I think fake Dr. Jill Biden really liked running the country, which, she was running a cabinet meeting in 2024 at one point, sitting at the front of the table. I think that people like Ron Klain and the other people around Biden liked the power that they had, so they could use him as, a figurehead. And what they hoped for is, if you remember the 2024 State of the Union, Biden was loud, he was energized, it was like Red Bull and Pixie Sticks. Like, okay, if we just give him enough energy and pump him, then maybe he could get through the debate, and then everybody's gonna focus on Trump, and Biden can do the campaign from the basement again, and after he's elected, then he could say, all right, I did my job, and hand it over to Kamala. I think that was the plan, and obviously the debate, live television, exposed all that. The funny thing about the debate, by the way, was that the Biden people thought, all right, let's give Trump an offer he absolutely will refuse. They said, all right, we're going to decide who's going to host the debate, CNN. We're going to decide on the moderators. We're going to cut off your mic when Biden's speaking and then his mic when you're speaking. Oh, we're not going to have a studio audience. Do you agree to all that? And they expected Trump to say, I'm not agreeing to that. That's a ridiculous offer. What do I get in return? And I don't know if you've ever seen Rocky IV. Anybody see Rocky IV? It's when he fights the Russian. Anybody remember that movie? Okay. And after Drago, literally kills Apollo Creed in the ring, then Rocky wants revenge. So then the Russians are like, okay, you will come to Moscow Christmas Day, and you will fight Drago while the KGB watches you train, and you won't get paid any money for it. I think they expected Rocky to say, I'm not agreeing to that, and Rocky's like, yeah, okay. That was Trump, the same thing with Biden, like, yeah, I agree to all of it, I don't care. Anything you want, I'll give you. And that exposed him. And that was that. Thank you. That's a great question. Maury, I got to apologize. I was busy. I was having a lot of technical issues before, and I'm like, I can't talk,
No
but
problem.
I promised you a question.
Two short questions.
Okay. You didn't accept my apology.
Do you think that Ron DeSantis will be invited to replace Pam Bondi? Because
Ooh. One Floridian for another.
I saw that suggested.
Uh-huh. That's one question. I think Bondi's days are numbered, to be quite honest with you. I think, in the case of the Epstein files, by the way, which, in all seriousness, I'll address real quick. I don't think there is an Epstein list, and here's why I think this. I've been following politics enough to know that if there was a list, it would have been weaponized by now. And every Democrat out there, liberals on TV especially, well, Donald Trump must be on that list. What is he hiding? You're telling me that Barack Obama and Joe Biden in 2016, when Trump won the nomination, wouldn't have broken that list out in about 2 seconds to destroy his campaign? And there wasn't a list, so they went to plan B. Give me that Steele dossier, that piece of garbage, that'll stick. So that's what they went with. So DeSantis, I think, would be an excellent Excellent choice. But I think Bondi, by saying, there's a list on my desk and I'm reviewing it right now. You could say there's a file. You could say I'm reviewing everything related to Epstein. That's a problem. When she said list, let's put it this way, in sales, they say to underpromise and overdeliver, and she overpromised and underdelivered. And I'm sure that Trump isn't happy about this. We'll see.
Okay, so let's think about 2028. So I think the front runner is going to be J.D. Vance for the top job. And I have some suggestions that I've looked at for vice president.
All right.
So
Besides you.
first I think is Marco Rubio,
Yeah.
Ron DeSantis,
Yeah.
Senator Cruz,
No.
Joe Concha,
Yes.
Jerome and Jerome Powell.
Jerome Powell. Maury, that's good delivery right there. That was well done. I will agree with you on Marco. Absolutely. Again, I spoke about him before. DeSantis, no. I think Trump has Irish amnesia. That's where you forget everything but the grudge, right? And it's true. So when I spoke with Trump down at Mar-a-Lago, we invited my wife down and me for New Year's Eve. Trump actually says to me, he goes, you know, you were very good. You had your little fling with DeSantis. I guess I said something nice about DeSantis after he won Florida by 18 points and said, you know, he could be the new standard bearer for the party. He remembered. He saw it and he remembered. It's like 3 years later, you know. He goes, but you know what? Over the past year and a half, you've been great. You've been very great. So I found that funny, but I think DeSantis is in his craw a little bit still. That Irish amnesia will make sure he probably won't be working with Trump. But I could be wrong about that. Hi.
So let me expand on the first question. On the first question that was asked, I'll start by saying, okay, Bill Clinton, I was definitely not a fan of Bill Clinton, but I never got the impression that Bill Clinton was not in charge of his White House. Don't know if that's true. Now we go ahead to Obama. I never had a question that Obama was not in charge of that White House, that he was a puppet for somebody else. I always believed that Biden is a puppet for somebody else. My question is, do you have any idea who somebody else is?
In Biden's case? Oh, I think it's committee. I think it was by committee. I think it was, Susan Rice. I think it was Ron Klain. I think it was Dr. Jill Biden. I think even you read reports that Hunter Biden was involved in a lot of the big decisions. Samantha Power. Yeah, I think just everybody they put in their input and they said, okay, we're going to go ahead with this. Yeah, I don't think there was one person. That makes sense. But Bill Clinton, I'll surprise the room. I thought was, and I talked about this last night at the reception, forget Monica, forget the blue dress, forget all that stuff. Up until that point, I kind of liked the job that he did in terms of saying, okay, he was street smart. He realized that if I want to win re-election, I got to work with Newt Gingrich. Contract with America. He said the era of big government is over. He passed welfare reform, Clinton did. He had a balanced budget amendment. We had surpluses. We weren't at war for the most part. You want to count, Kosovo, fine, I guess. But overall, we had peace and we had prosperity, and I felt like he was in charge. He was kind of a charismatic guy. So up until Monica, which is the dumbest decision you could possibly do, pretty good president. So there you go. Try to look at it objectively.
What about the theory that they knew that Biden would fail in the debate and that they put him up there to do just that so they could move on?
Right. I think that was part of the thinking, like, okay, if he doesn't do well in June, we have time, right, to replace him. Because usually presidential debates, there's usually 3 of them. First one's usually last week in September on a Tuesday, and then they have one in October, and then one about a week and a half before the presidential campaign. If they waited until September, they were screwed, right? Because they would have already nominated him at the convention in Chicago in August, so I guess you would have to unnominate him. And then Kamala would have like 2 weeks to run, which actually would have benefited her because the more people got to know her, the worse it got. But yeah, that's a good theory as well. Hi.
Hi. Do you think the haters, Comey and Brennan, will face the full justice that they deserve?
That's a great question. And I'm doing this right now, bowing my head down, because it's like every time I think there's going to be accountability in Washington, they have the hearings, and everybody gets their flesh, and then nothing effing happens. So, it's clear Comey and Brennan manipulated intelligence. And also, by the way, if they were so apolitical in their jobs, where they would just run the FBI like Comey did, or run the CIA like Brennan did, clapper over at DNI, then why, after they left their jobs, Brennan goes to MSNBC, and you can't tell the difference between that guy and Keith Olbermann. You're like, wait, you did your job objectively? No. And same thing with Comey writing 2 anti-Trump books. He's playing with seashells, spelling out numbers. You know, that was a little weird, wasn't it? And then he also had a Showtime series named after him. Clapper signed with CNN. Andy McCabe signed with CNN. All these ex-people that were at the top of intelligence agencies signed with the most liberal networks in the country. What does that tell you in terms of how they did their job? Hi.
I have a few questions.
Yes, sir.
My
What's your
first
name, by the way?
question, Matthew.
I like how you have like an official name tag on.
It's because I'm not on the job right now, but
Oh, okay.
But so my first question is, during the election, I always had this feeling that maybe the Bidens were a bit bitter after Kamala taking the election for the Democrats, because there was like that one moment in time where Biden wore the MAGA hat at the fire.
That's right, yeah, in Pennsylvania.
Yes, so I'm wondering, I'm curious your thoughts on that. And my second question, because I'm very curious, I'm very into European politics at the moment. And during the election, Keir Starmer, for example, and many other countries in Europe tried to support Kamala. And I think Keir Starmer even sent like delegates to help with the Kamala campaign. So I'm also wondering what's preventing us from helping the conservatives in Europe kind of gain power as well, and because there's like, for example, in Germany the AfD, and
We got it. By the way, I follow Matthew in the gym. He presses 600 pounds. I press like 14 ounces, you know. It's very embarrassing to go follow him, you know. So I try to go ahead of him, and then when he goes to the weights, he looks over at me like, you know, like, well, whatever, right? Thank you, Matthew.
He's got like an Apollo Creed thing going. Like, you know, that's the same build. All right, to answer the first question, Biden and Kamala hate each other. That was abundantly clear. They were supposed to have lunch every week as president and vice president, and it only happened a handful of times, right? You just got the feeling that they weren't communicating on any level. But this was the thing that really revealed it for me. 2 things, actually. So you remember a hurricane hit Florida. It was a devastating one. And DeSantis is as good as anybody as far as governors responding to natural disasters that hit his state. Even Democrats will tell you that down there. He has armies ready just to make sure that they're mobilized, constant communication, constant press conferences, and they recover quite quickly, right? So when that hurricane hit, then Kamala called DeSantis to see if there was anything she could do. And she never called before. Now, suddenly she's getting involved because she wants to show that she could be a leader in these situations. Meanwhile, Biden had already spoken to DeSantis. And Biden said, Governor, you're doing a great job. It tells the press, I gave him my personal number. He even went out, walked to the podium at the James S. Brady briefing room when Karine Jean-Pierre was up there, took over the press conference just to talk about the hurricane and how well DeSantis was doing. And it was at the exact time that Kamala was giving a speech in Nevada that they had to dump out of to go to Biden. That was by design. And you know, we've talked about how Biden, his cognitive abilities obviously slipped. During that time he was defending DeSantis, he sounded like Shakespeare. I mean, he was cogent and sharp. You're like, whoa, you know, he's really passionate about this one. So the fact that he supported DeSantis in the face of Kamala during that was certainly one thing. And then on election day, you just couldn't help but notice, I believe in Freud in terms of there are no accidents, there are no coincidences. And Dr. Jill Biden on that day could have picked any color to wear to go to the election, go to the ballot box, and she wore a deep red, a MAGA red, one would call it. I think that was by design. I'm not going to say they voted for Trump. I think they weren't upset when Kamala lost because they felt that she, along with Obama and Pelosi and Schumer, had shivved, her husband and Joe Biden in inserting Kamala. And then Kamala, remember what they did to Joe during the Democratic National Convention? The sitting president of the United States, they put on a Monday night at 11:30 just to make sure as few people saw him as possible. And then he was on a plane the next morning out, didn't even stay for his own convention because they didn't want the cutaway shots going to him. Complete disrespect. So in that sense, I don't blame the Bidens for being angry at Kamala and Democrats for shivving him to the side when, you know, they felt that he should still be running for president. Go ahead.
There's an article in the paper today that a committee of sorts authorized the auto pen for pardons. So, are those pardons valid? actually authorized by Biden if he's not aware of what's going on? How does that work?
Okay, I'm not a lawyer, but I follow two very smart lawyers on Fox, and that's Jonathan Turley and Andy McCarthy. So Turley I saw just yesterday talking about how those pardons could be invalid because if they're not actually signed and witnessed by the person signing it, particularly in this case, the commander-in-chief, the chief executive of the country, then you very easily could go to court and say that these are invalid. And if they're invalid, then if I'm Liz Cheney and I'm Dr. Anthony Fauci and I'm Andy Schiff, or whatever his name is, Adam Schiff, sorry, then I'd be a little worried right now, no question.
Final question.
I'll hold it.
If anybody should know that, right?
Yes, yes.
I have seen him do that 1,000 times, but it's tempting. Anyway, this is a good news, bad news.
Uh-oh.
The good news is, I want to share with the audience that Joe Concha had a spectacular slideshow put together for everyone. Absolutely. The bad news is, he gave it to me. So my apologies.
No, it's fine, it's fine. That's my fault.
Was that it? Okay.
On that note,
Public of ladies and gentlemen.
drinks on Paul.